As we worked on a number of bills, especially after the war with Afghanistan and then the subsequent war in Iraq, many members, myself included, tried to vote for issues that made a more objective approach to Middle East policy, a more objective approach to the countries, a more objective approach to the way we dealt with the Taliban and Afghanistan, and a more objective approach to the way we dealt with pressures from a number of different lobby groups, and I'll just say AIPAC was pretty prominent among them, and our role between the Palestinians and the Israelis. On a number of occasions, we would, for example, try to add an amendment to an appropriations bill, a number of appropriations bills, whether it was the defense appropriations bill, the foreign relations appropriations bill, to say that this was after the Afghanistan and Iraq war started, to say that the administration could not do any military incursion into Iran unless they had the approval of Congress. At one point, there was an amendment that passed through the Rules Committee that was ready to hit the House floor to be voted on the next day to deal with that issue. And between the Rules Committee, and this was in '07, between the Rules Committee and the House floor, that amendment was pulled with no explanation. On a number of occasions, many of us wanted to have a large number of members represented on letters to the modulus to talk about a parliamentary exchange between the Iranian parliamentarians and members of the U.S. House to have a dialogue. And when some of us went to ask for signatures, there were many members, both during a Republican majority and during a Democratic majority, many members that would tell me or tell Gregory Meeks, for example. The two of us were sponsoring a series of letters. I can't do that because I would be crushed like a walnut. My name appears on that letter. Now, it didn't take us very long to figure out who was doing that crushing of that walnut, whether it was a lobbyist, whether it was either Speaker of the House, but there was pressure not to do that. And on a number of occasions, there were amendments that would go into the Defense Appropriations Bill, the Defense Bill, or almost any other bill that had any remote relationship with the Middle East, where we would add a paragraph recommending a dialogue with the Iranians, recommending that the Syrian ambassador be reappointed. And those things, whether it was a Democratic-controlled Congress or a Republican-controlled Congress, was like pulling teeth from a rhinoceros without any anesthesia. It was just simply very difficult to do. Now, this is not an impossible task. With the leadership in the White House, it is possible to move this in the right direction. But there is a hold on the U.S. Congress by a number of different groups that are trying to dissuade members of Congress, the American people, that there is only one ally that the United States can depend on in Israel, in the Middle East, and that is Israel. What we are seeing now in the Middle East is a replay of history, a replay of the past. And what members of Congress aren't able to do or choose not to do is to objectively evaluate that vast early warning system, which is the complexity of the Middle East. It took America 100 years after we abolished slavery to abolish slavery. There's not much difference between apartheid and lynchings after lynchings after lynchings and gross discrimination than there is to slavery. It took America 100 years to do that. The Middle East just was beginning to wake up into the modern age after the Ottoman Empire disintegrated. And we seem to lump them in one easy view that is the path of least resistance. members of Congress, and I'm a former member of Congress, and I spoke like this while I was a member of Congress. That's probably why I lost my Republican primary. But it is so important for us to understand the issues from an objective way, from their historic precedent. And if we did that, it would be much easier then to apply to the Middle East what we did to Europe after World War II. Not only an economic alliance, but a military alliance between those countries. Iran, for example, is now debating whether or not a woman should be able to run for president. Our enemies of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Our ally, Saudi Arabia, is still debating whether or not women should be able to drive a car. So there's the depth of differences that we can move into and become the arbiter of peace as Americans. It is there. It's possible. Ignorance, arrogance, dogma, and power. What's the solution? The antidote to ignorance? Knowledge. How do you do away with arrogance? The sense of humility. How do you deal with dogma? The sense of tolerance. And power is the accumulation of information. You want good public policy. What we need to pursue, myself included, is a public that becomes more knowledgeable with a sense of humility as Americans when it comes to dealing with the rest of the world, and a tolerance for different opinions. Congress is overworked, I can tell you that right now. They're overworked in their district, they're overworked here, they're overworked every 2 years to accumulate enough money to run their campaigns. They're pressured from all kinds of groups, whether it's talk show hosts, the media, their constituents. I will tell you that many Republicans wanted to pursue a policy of dialogue with the Iranians, wanted to pursue a more objective policy between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But they didn't want to go against either the administration, either the lobby groups, or it was too hard to explain their constituents back home. So they would vote along party lines. America is better than that. So on the one hand, you want sympathy for overworked members of Congress. On the other hand, the sense of urgency to achieve what needs to be done. Their hand, their mind, their heart needs to change. And part of that is this organization, you and the public.